Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Now then, have to say, Gerry Thornley of the Irish Times here in the studio. You're very welcome. Thank you for
Joe.
coming in. And Fiona Hayes, Grand Slam winner, is with us as well. Good evening.
Hello, Joe. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. So Friday night, from bad to worse for Munster. Big win for Connacht, 20 points to 11 in Galway. We had Leinster Sharks at the RDS, exactly the kind of fare the URC organisers have been craving. 54 points Leinster, 34 points Sharks, and then Ulster put 47 points on the Osprey Saturday night, winning out by 30 in the end. So next up for Connacht, Friday night, Leinster are in Galway. Munster on Saturday evening have the Bulls at Thomond, and Ulster are on their South African travels now. They'll face the Lions first of all. So we will start in Galway, Gerry. Connacht 20, Munster 11. You were there, I presume?
I was, yes.
I had the pitch look.
Looked absolutely beautiful.
Same on TV.
Yeah, looked really amazing, to be honest. Yeah.
Fiona, were you there?
I wasn't. No, Joe. I didn't get a chance to go up at all, so I was just watching it on the TV.
Okay. So for Munster, this is getting a bit serious now. Their only win, Zebre at home, and there was no bonus point in that performance, and there was much to be desired, given that they had scored 20... Or they'd scored 3 tries, 25 odd points by 25 minutes and never got the bonus try. They're 12th in the table, 13 points off Leinster, 10 off Ulster. There's nothing much working, I suppose, is the issue, Fiona. When you try and hone in on a certain issue that they could just fix and get moving, it's kind of across the board problems, really.
Yeah, definitely across the board. You know, I looked up some general stats after the weekend. I watched the game and I was trying to pinpoint, obviously, the performance. The accuracy is really bad. But something that really jumped out to me, Joe, was like the missed tackle count so far in the competition. They're first out of all the teams. They're up at 78. You know, they're down at 14th for lining out accuracy at only 80%. They've conceded 38 penalties, 8 of those in the scrum, which they had a bad day against Connacht on Friday. It just seems like even the basics aren't going well. When you're watching the game, you can see the guys are getting up for it. They're trying to break that gain line. They're trying to string the phases together, but it just seems to break down. And, you know, Roundtree has spoken after all the games saying it is, you know, it's coming. He's disappointed. The guys are disappointed, but it's those simple basics that's really, I can't understand. That 78 missed tackle count is absolutely crazy at this level of Munster team. And for a Munster squad that has always kind of prided itself at the line out, that isn't firing either at times.
Yeah, I think it's actually 52 penalties in the 4 games.
Yeah, that's what I make it, 52 penalties. Yeah.
Worse again, really. So they were 8-5 up at half time.
They were slightly flattered to be 8-5 up, given Jack Carty had hit the post twice and Connacht had more of the game. And I dare say at the end of it all, if Connacht hadn't won, they'd have been kicking themselves all week. As that would, not least as that would have made it 4 defeats in a row with Leinster to come home next Friday. So at least they can breathe a little easier this week, enjoy training that bit more. And it's a bit of a free pass against Leinster, as it pretty much is for everybody. But for Munster, another one over the 4 rounds, only 8 line breaks. Like, they just haven't looked like penetrating sides at all. It's very hard to actually ascertain what their game is because they're just not building through phases. I thought the return of Gavin Coombs did improve matters significantly. It was more of a focal point for their running game, both as a carrier, he was their best carrier, and as a distributor, enabler, bringing other people into the game. In mitigation, you have to say that they're missing Mike Haley, Simon Zebo, Andrew Conway, Keith Earls from their back 3. Injured. And you look at, I watched the Emerging Ireland performance yesterday, and you look at how Shane Daly took his try and how well Calvin Nash played, chasing high kicks and so forth. You'd have to wonder if they'd been available, how they might have performed a little bit better. Joey Carby, I think, was starting his first match ever at fullback for Munster, so far as I could ascertain. And we had 2 academy wingers, Colin Phillips and Patrick Campbell, who had a tough night at the office. All 3 of them did. I mean, Carty and Fitzgerald found space in behind. The kickers did there was a lot of all-weather grass in behind that they found. Yeah. Joey was a bit exposed for the Mac Hansen try, ball watching a little bit. So they really had difficulties in the back 3. You know, the 50-22 from Stephen Fitzgerald in behind Colin Phillips. So that's a mitigating factor. I do think this Emerging Ireland tour, while it's obviously had many pluses for the players themselves and for the Irish coaching staff, has been disruptive for the 4 provinces and possibly Munster the most. Yeah. And if they miss out in the top 8 by a point or 2, given what they've had to endure in the first 4 weeks of the season, that'll be, you know, that would be quite costly. And such concepts are now very real, that they might actually miss out on the Heineken Cup next season. Must be very worrying time for the provinces, Joe, because Thomond Park is now a huge game on Saturday. They need a real rallying focal point from their crowd, and they need a win desperately just to kickstart their season properly in front of the Thomond Park faithful. I'm in my struggles to comprehend what they're trying to achieve. There's one theory, I've half-baked theory, classic one of mine, maybe, might be no truth in it whatsoever. But you've got a new head coach in Graham Roundtree. You've got a new tack coach in Mike Prendergast. You've got a new defence coach in Dennis Leamy, and even a new forwards coach in Andy Kiriakou. This is the most changed coaching ticket by a distance of the four. There's been continuity all elsewhere. And maybe there is just a little bit of information overload. That they're trying to impart so much information to the players at these high intensity training sessions that it's just leading to a little bit of confusion or incoherence in the performances.
Fiona, to Gerry's point, can you deduce what they're trying to do in attack?
You can see that they're obviously they're not going back to that kicking in. They're trying to get runners. They're trying to get runners off Healy. You can see their focus. They're trying to get that ball wide. We probably didn't see a lot of that. We saw Munster picking and going very narrow, and I can see a change, especially in the forwards way they are attacking. They're definitely getting a bit wider, but there's nothing really obvious. There's no real change, and I know that there's a complete coaching ticket. Obviously, you have new ideas coming in, but I mean, you have to go back and look at the simple game, and it's a basic game, and I think it's the individual performances and it's the carries that are letting them down. And as I said, it's the set piece is an issue, the discipline. So I think Gerry could be spot on there. There's a lot of information obviously being given to these guys from all different sectors, with each coach obviously concentrating on their own area. But definitely in attack, Joe, I can't see anything hugely different or if the game plan has completely gone out the window. It's just how they're going about their business probably isn't as clinical and accurate as it was at times last season.
Fiona, would you say that they're probably producing the worst ruck ball at the breakdown on their own ball of any of the four provincial sides in Ireland by a distance? They just haven't got their clear-outs right at all. Their ball presentation goes down to the carries, I know, as well.
Yep.
So that's really handicapping them in attack as well.
That's been the same from day one this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing. I spoke about that early on in the season, Joe. I think it was with yourself, and I was saying, obviously I saw for maybe the next 20 minutes of the game that you could see that the clean-outs had got a little bit better, but their height approach in the breakdown has been crazy at times. I know they're tired. You've new guys coming in who mightn't probably have the same footwork or are trying to adapt to the game, but just the clean-out, the ball is so slow coming out. It seems to be always on the back foot. Ben Healy's trying to work with it. With Conor Murray obviously starting this week, I just thought everything about the game looked really, really slow at times, and that's including the breakdown, which they haven't improved. And that to me is crazy, because we've talked about in the past. I'm sure they've looked at videos. I'm sure they're focused on that an area, but I haven't seen definitely over the 80 minutes where it's completely changed and they've really got to grips with that area.
And then normally they bully teams, particularly Connacht over the years, at scrum and line-out time. But the first two scrums, particularly the second one, when Connacht almost obliterated the Munster pack, you've no idea what impact that had on the 5,000 plus crowd around the ground. It was almost seismic. You could almost hear the earth move underneath, or the all-weather pitch move underneath. It really had a profound effect in the game. It drew a line in the sand. It possibly influenced the referee as well a little bit. And then you'd have got long odds on Dave Heffron having a 100% return from his line-out throws against Munster, Peter O'Mahony et al. Whereas I think they stole about 3 of the Munster balls. It was quite... If they don't have that platform, then they are going to struggle. So they're struggling at scrum, line-out and breakdown. It's kind of difficult to build an attack as a result of that.
Yeah, very worrying. Yeah. Sorry, Fiona.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, and look, I mean, Thornbury probably had one of the best games I've seen him play for Connacht, and Beelum as well was absolutely exceptional. But the Munster have to take that. We need leaders to step up. You have Kilcoyne on there. He gives away 2 early penalties. He needs to put his hand up. He's trying to get back in that Irish jersey and get back in that setup after being injured as well. But it just doesn't seem like anyone's taking the reins and really having man-of-the-match performances week in, week out. We saw Jack O'Donoghue do it at times last season, but I'm not seeing anybody so far week in, week out really playing well for those 80 minutes.
There's probably a lack of confidence there as well.
Yeah, it's definitely that, and you can see it filtering through.
I'm sure, Fiona, you watched the exchanges up front especially closely. It was quite noticeable. We spoke after the Dragons game, I remember now, and they smelled blood somewhere 15-20 minutes into the game up front. The Dragons, it was almost like they sensed, hang on, we're going to take Munster on here. And so here we are a number of weeks later, and Connacht, scoring those 2 tries in the second half, Bealham and Paul Boyle, they obviously smelled blood as well in the maul and in the scrum. So even as Gerry said, that traditional Munster grit and, well, look, we'll take someone on up front, that's evaporated thus far this season.
Yeah, definitely. And Connacht bullied them up front. I mean, at times, right. the maul was that Paul Boyle scored the trial. Munster were looking at the referee. This guy they were looking for a knock on, maybe to back it up, but they didn't seem focused on the game. You should be more worried about what you're doing in that maul and stopping it dead. And I remember a couple of years ago even talking to Graham Rowntree, and I was just so impressed and how he brought about a different change and how Munster defended the maul, and they were stopping it at sorts and they were getting in early. I haven't even seen that in this team today, and obviously Rowntree still has these same principles there, but it just doesn't seem to be happening, because I haven't seen any amazing setups by any other team that's totally obliterated Munster. It's more like they don't seem like they're really, really up for it when they're in there.
Yeah, one of the kind of mumblings which has come out in the last couple of weeks as well is that they're not as fit really as the coaching ticket might like them to be as a group, and to implement this more high octane game plan you need a level of fitness which isn't there. So that's just to compound matters further. They're going to have to be very, very savvy here, Graham Rowntree and his coaching staff, in terms of trying to pick, well, we're going to find some root causes here. We can't fix everything all at once. We're going to have to fix certain things, and as you said, Gerry, we need to get some points on the board now, like style points are for later on. Yep. We now actually need to make sure that we get moving here.
It's almost back to basics, isn't it? The result comes almost before the performance now, because they need points on the board. If they miss out in the top 8 and miss out in the Heineken Champions Cup next year and are consigned to the Challenge Cup, I mean, the Red Army will vote with their feet, you know what I mean? And I'm hearing that, for example, the Munster-Leinster game at the Aviva Stadium has only sold around 28,000 tickets as of yet. That was always traditionally a sellout, and by now would be at least the ticket sales would be in the mid-30s. One ventures that the Munster supporters are long sick, become tired of the Aviva Stadium, and particularly games against Leinster, and then you throw in the heartbreak of the Toulouse match as well. It's definitely not their favourite ground in the world.
No.
I remember them losing against Saracens, Scarlets there, I think, as well in playoff matches. So
right.
Their record is pretty poor there. So they need results quickly. It looks like they almost need to go back a little bit to the basics. Bulls is going to be a very searching examination. I do think that, for example, Leinster just won at the weekend a pulsatingly thrilling match, which we'll come on to, by 54-34. Conceded 34 points, 5 tries. What do you think they probably concentrated the most on in training today?
Defence.
Exactly. So I would think that the Munster might have to start really simplifying things a little bit more, just to get confidence back up again, be very sure in certain aspects of what they're going to try and do, and just go out and get it. Hopefully get the crowd going early in Thomond Park. That was key, like, you know what I mean? That you see Connacht score really early on in front of 7,500 plus, nearly a sellout. They're immediately into the game. They become a factor in the match. But if you start slowly, then your home advantage doesn't count as much. It's like Arsenal scoring after a minute against Liverpool, Joe.
Well, you did well to work that in.
It's just always worth working in. And so, I do think that it's a massive game for them. They score early. Every match has its own individual plot lines, and it often dictated by what happens in the first 10 or 15 minutes. So just target a really good start, get ahead on the board, get the crowd into the game, get a win, and move on.
And so this has been said now increasingly over the last 24 hours, 48 hours in particular, but maybe the last week, that qualification for the Champions Cup is not the straightforward, taken for granted matter it has previously been. I haven't really looked into that too much, because I just assumed, it'll be grand. But seeing as you brought it up, and we're seeing that the South African sides, I think, are better again this year for having had the experience of last year, how tricky is Champions Cup qualification now, realistically, for Munster here?
Well, they've picked up, 6 points so far, thereabouts, against a fixture list of the Dragons, Cardiff, Zebra and Connacht.
As easy a run with respect to all Connacht.
With absolute total respect.
In particular. But
they've still got to play Leinster twice. They've still got to play 4 South African sides. They've still got to play Ulster twice. Yeah. So their fixture list is going to get progressively harder, and it's starting to get harder right now. So they're a little bit behind the 8 ball, even in terms of making that top 8 now. I remember one season they did it with 2 late wins in Musgrave Park. They needed 2 wins out of 2 with bonus points and got the job done in front of Musgrave Park. They might have a little bit of a high wire act to get into the Champions Cup again next year, because as we're seeing from the South African sides, they're only going to get stronger. Munster, it hit Connacht last season, it's going to hit them again this season. They are in the tougher section. Munster could conceivably finish 8th, but miss out on Champions Cup because they've one of the Italians or Scottish sides tops their pool and finishes 9th. You know what I mean? So I think it is progressively getting more and more difficult to qualify for the Champions Cup. You certainly can't take it as read, and you certainly can't take it as read when you make a start like Munster made.
Fiona, Healy at 10 and Carberry at 15 caught the eye. Was that more just by necessity with injury in the back three? Look, Joey, sorry, you're going to have to just start there, and this isn't Munster trying to find something new, do you think?
No, I think it was more necessity. I'm sure there's that conversation going on with Ireland. I mean, you're probably not looking at Carberry getting a chance at 15 at the minute unless he is an absolute cracking few games, which he mightn't even get a shot in the Munster game, so I'm sure they have to. He will be guaranteed some game time with Munster at 10, because how can he get called up to Six Nations if he isn't playing that? So it's literally, I think, out of necessity. Gerry spoke earlier about that back three and the guys going away, and obviously there's been injuries there, so I'd say to get Joey game time, he's gone in there. And obviously Ben Healy's had a couple of good games. I wouldn't say, as I said earlier, he's getting the ball a lot going backwards or off not gain line carries, so I thought he's been okay. I thought Casey's actually been okay as well, but I would imagine going into the Bulls game in Thomond Park, if we can get a couple of guys back in the squad, that you might see Carberry definitely starting at 10. He will be given a couple of games, or that Leinster away or Ulster at home game as well.
And would you anticipate Munster with a real back to basics performance against the Bulls, or like the coaching staff only have so much wiggle room here to aspire to play this lovely brand of rugby, or this more expansive brand of rugby? They're kind of out of wiggle room almost.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're, as I said, that missed tackle stats. I mean, they've turned over the ball so many times as well. It's at basic error. So I think they will look at it. Pressure is obviously mounting for a performance. You're watching other games throughout the weekend. As a Munster supporter, I've talked to people about this, and they just aren't enjoying the Munster games. They're not seeing tries. They're not seeing, magical episodes like we saw in that Leinster Sharks game. Some of the tries scored were amazing. The same with Ulster. They seem to be electric in attack. We're just not seeing that with Munster, so I think they need to take a bit of pressure off the guys. Probably we'll see a back to basics, really concentrating on that set piece, really trying to get the guys over the gain line. And I think once the confidence is built up in them, then they can start looking at playing that expansive rugby, because I know the Bulls lost to Glasgow at the weekend. I mean, but they're an excellent team, and definitely on their counter attack they can be very hard to contain.
Because for the last number of years, Gerry, we would talk about Munster URC games, which they had generally won, and we would say, yeah, they won, but is this going to do it in Europe in the latter stages, and criticise the style of rugby? We've now declined to now they're just not winning.
That's what results do, Joe. It's a results business, ultimately, always has been, always will be.
I wonder privately, did the coaching staff think maybe we've bitten off more than we could chew in terms of trying to change too much too quickly? And as Fiona says, let's get some wins, let's get confidence. But Dragons and Osprey, they looked like very winnable games early on.
And Cardiff looked very winnable. Yeah, Zebra looked like a 5-pointer.
So maybe they thought it was the right time. Let's try and play this different style.
Yeah,
I don't know. So it's tricky. Malachi Feketawa hasn't lit it up either, I would say.
No, I wouldn't say Charlie Nuttall has either. Maybe a bit better. It's tough coming into a new environment from another country, playing in a different league, playing with new teammates, playing against new opposition. It takes time, but he hasn't really torn it up yet, for sure. That hasn't helped either. But I wouldn't be saddling much of it with him. It's largely the same pool of players, let's be honest, that were there last season.
Yeah.
That's not really a huge factor. I would say the injury, particularly injury toll in the back three and in the Emerging Ireland Tour, hasn't done them any favours.
Okay.
So ultimately, they will all come back and the season will settle down. It's just where are Munster going to be in the log?
And with that, sorry, Joe, as well. I mean, Feketau's he hasn't lit it up, but he's getting a good few. He's high up in the carry charts, but he's just not getting the ball in space. Munster can't seem to give him the ball in space. He's getting it with two guys attacking him every time. You can see he's trying to offload it, but he's absolutely taking hits out there. And I think the game plan, obviously, Goggin is in there. He might, they're trying to form a partnership. There's injuries in the centre. There's guys away there as well. They seem to be sticking with Goggin, but I don't think it's working. I don't think they're finding that space.
Okay. And what would you say of Connacht then, Fiona? What do we take, or what do they take from that performance? It wasn't the most high quality 80 minutes across the board. Connacht, a bit like Munster, just needed points.
Yeah, I think so. You looked at Jack Carty's kicking game. I mean, at times I was questioning why aren't they going for points? They should have been far ahead of Munster. They would have been disappointed at half time. But look, they had the crowd behind them. I thought some of the players were absolutely outstanding on the day. I spoke about Thornbury. I thought he was immense in the line out. Just, they seemed to be, they were up for it. They were physical. There was a want there to win the game. The front row were exceptional. As you spoke about Dave Heffernan, I thought he got around the pitch and got involved as well. But look, Connacht, obviously, we've talked about how attacking, we haven't seen the same style attacking, or they weren't getting the ball wide as much this season as we saw last season. But they went out there to try and win the game, and they came away with all points, and they came away with guys actually having great performances as well. We saw Matt Hansen, he's electric when he got going, his footwork and everything, and he burned Joey. I know Joey was watching the ball, but he done really well to catch and go around him. So look, they had some star performances, and on the 4G pitch, Munster training 4G as well, there's no excuse there. I just thought that it really suited them, and they looked like they were getting around the place pretty well.
It was a vital win for them, and it was coming. I mean, I tipped them to win. I thought their performances were progressing over the 3 games, and you could see they were making more line breaks, they were making entries in the 22. They looked closer to winning a match than Munster had done, and I thought even at 13-8, I thought they shouldn't have been underdogs. I thought it was generous odds on Connacht given the way they've been playing and the emotive factor of being at home. You know what I mean? 7,500 capacity crowd virtually, and wanting to do it on this new pitch. So now they've got momentum going into the Leinster game. It was almost must win for them as well.
Yeah. Given
they've got Leinster coming this Friday, they could have been 5 from 5 defeats, and then how would their season be looking? So they needed that. They'll get another full house this coming Friday. Very weird, the fixture, isn't it? That their 2 marquee matches have coming back to back in October. The first 2 home games of the season. Really puzzling fixture schedule. But anyway, I think I agree with everything that Fiona said about all the performances. Gavin Thornby, Jack Carty will only get better, and that was his first run out since May.
Yeah.
And John Porch again came up with a couple of hugely important plays. Maybe Conor Fitz, I don't know if he's the answer at full back. That's a bit of an issue for them, but it's a very handy having that left boot option. So there's a little bit of momentum now, which is something Munster would love to have.
May nobody look at you the way Johnny Sexton looks at referees. I did think to myself, I was like, it's nice to be back here. It's just something very reassuring about Johnny Sexton giving out to Craig Evans. I thought the world is crazy at the moment, but there are some things we can depend on. 18,000 of this game, 13 tries, 8 for Leinster, 5 for Sharks, who played a great brand of rugby, you'd have to say. Some of their tries were fantastic. It was 21-20 at half time, so a real contest. Leinster pulled away in the second half with 5 tries, including from Andrew Porter and Robbie Henshaw and Sexton in that second half. So I said, Gerry, at the top, this is the kind of regular season fare that URC organisers and fans alike have been crying out for years.
Yep. And there was a portent of it in the semi-final defeat last season as well, and I always felt that Leinster were going to target this match because they'd been beaten at home by a South African side in the semi-final. It didn't matter, it wasn't the same South African side. They wanted to make a statement, as they'd done in the first game of last season as well. And I thought that they would go for it, and they did. It's a little bit surprising that they were opened up, but then again, you've got to give credit for the way the Sharks played and some of the tries, like Afalele Fassi, the fullback, 2 tries, and that winner, Takir Abrahams.
Fast.
Whoa, and quick feet. What footwork.
His try where he knocked it by, I'm not sure who it was.
Yeah.
And he had about a 15-metre head start on him, and he said, I like the look of this.
Yeah, caught Gary Ringrose. The Leinster's man of the match.
It was okay.
Yeah.
So
this is after leaving 3 or 4 people in his wake with his footwork from a high ball. Basically, when he caught the ball, he had the entire Leinster team in front of him, and he scored at the other end, which is quite a feat.
Yeah, it wasn't a lumbering second row. He kicked it by and outran.
Yeah. So this could be important of things to come, that the South African sides are now going to generate this excitement every time they come to town. And then, of course, you've got the prospect of Leinster going back there, and they didn't have Khaleesi and and Mapimpe and these players, they're all going to be a serious force in this competition. And do you
think that's why it was a sellout? Like, not every Leinster game is a sellout. Do you think?
I think the semi-final last year had something to do with it. Kind of, okay, we better start taking these South Africans. We should have been there for that semi-final, roaring on our team, and it was a great match as well, that semi-final. So we better. These South African sides are going to be taken seriously from now on.
Yes.
And it's great for the tournament. This is what they wanted. This kind of high-end entertainment. And I've no doubt it's improving standards, and it's probably going to be beneficial for the Irish teams, and it's probably not helping the All Blacks or Australia that they've come into our league and away from Super Rugby.
Because Fiona, Stuart Lancaster has talked in the past, and we all talk about Leinster struggling with size, be it La Rochelle or Saracens, but Lancaster and Leo Cullen have acknowledged that, but only to a point. I don't think they love that, but they have certainly said, Lancaster definitely on the record as saying, we could do with being tested more often. So now suddenly, in comparison with a couple of years ago, Leinster have a lot of tape to look at and say, well, geez, defensively, you know, like as opposed to being ambushed in a semi-final and they don't get a second chance.
Well, that's it, and let's not. These South African teams aren't small in the pack anyway, so they'll definitely come up against some big guys. But like that game was just outstanding to watch. It was so exciting. You know, as a neutral, you're just watching it, enjoying the rugby that's in front of you, and to see the Sharks score some absolutely immense tries. I mean, a strike plays off set piece. They cut open Leinster a couple of times. Now, to be fair to Leinster, they're absolutely outstanding in that kind of red zone, in that scoring zone. They were so clinical. They were really good in the second half. In particular, they might go back and have a look at their defence, but I thought their attack, and they, you know, even we saw two lovely kicks through. We had Nagati to Henshaw, and Henshaw had a kick through himself to Ringrose, and we saw Johnny with another little chip over to himself. So look, it was just a game where we saw a bit of everything. It was highly entertaining, and to have that many tries scored as well really brought the excitement to a game. And it shows like Leinster can now go back, as Gerry said earlier, and look and say, look, we need to work on those areas. Whereas probably in previous seasons, they're just cruising through some of these games. They haven't seen, we've been opened up here. What's the reason behind that? Whereas this is going to happen a little bit more with these South African teams, and they can really test themselves. And
in conceding those 5 tries, did you see anything in Leinster's defence that caught your eye as being troublesome in particular?
Just a kind of, not really in particular, but I think off some of the strike plays off set piece. I mean, there was a lovely line out the Sharks just when they got wide. I think that and the transition as well, the turnover, when they turned over the ball, Leinster were probably a little bit caught high up in the tackle area. So it's just readjusting and probably getting their shape a little bit quicker than that. But you know, Leinster are the type of team, they've guys in, guys out. They're constantly, they can change teams up each week, and it doesn't really make much of a difference. So I'd say there was a couple of areas where maybe guys had kind of come in and weren't as sharp as other guys, and they'll tighten that up. There was nothing absolutely that opened up in my mind about how they were defending. They weren't too narrow. Maybe they shot up a couple of times, but I think that was more individual error rather than the system's failure.
I would say, Fiona, that they've had a little bit of difficulty blooding in Charlie Natai, particularly in that Zebra game. I remember I think there was 3 first phase tries by Zebra through their backs, through strike plays. Yeah. There was another couple by the Sharks on Saturday, and at times the midfield's got a little bit tight or bunched, and they've left space and left their wingers quite exposed. And I do think that's been a little bit of an issue for them, just him bleeding into that midfield and it all making understanding each other in defence. That's been one little bit of an issue for them. But there was also that Gary Ringrose chip as well. Do you remember, off his left foot? I didn't know he could chip off his left foot. He had a great game. And the other thing about it as well is very relevant towards the Heineken Cup, isn't it? Because playing these South African sides, Leinster have struggled against the Saracens of this world, and now they're back top of the table and back in the Champions Cup, and the South African sides are in the Champions Cup again, so it's going to get harder to win, and they struggled against La Rochelle the last 2 seasons. And with that in mind, isn't Jason Jenkins looking at a brilliant signing to me? The difference he's making to their maul in attack and defence. What a cute bit of business. And you think back to Brad Thorne and Scott Fardy and Nathan Hines, they've always had, as Bernard Jackman described on TV, a tractor, and a foreign tractor in the second row who just does the donkey work, the dirty work, and they're all talking about him. Whenever you interview Leinster players, they talk about his intelligence, his influence on their scrum and on their maul.
Did Munster let him go?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not exactly sure how that worked, but he only played something like 420 minutes. Now, he did have a good few injuries, but then it seemed that Johan van Graan wasn't picking him much either. So it's quite extraordinary to see his influence in Leinster. I mean, I told you about that Ulster game. That first hour, they were just bullying Ulster off the park. Then he went off and Ulster began to bully Leinster. Now, it can't just be down to him, I know, but his influence it's been very encouraging for Leinster, because they needed that, no doubt.
Yeah, and it's the off the ball work, as you're speaking about, Gerry. It's not those big massive carries. Obviously he makes that and he gets gain round, but it's his work inside in the middle of the mall. It's his rocking ability. He's getting Leinster that quick ball. A lot of people that probably wouldn't understand how important it is to have that guy, and especially in the scrum as well. You can see he's tightening up that scrum, so he's such a big bulk. But what a bit of business is right. Poor old Munster, they'd Snyman and Jenkins, and look, there was a lot of injuries, and now he's absolutely shining up in Leinster for them. Fair play.
Tell you, they're running a tight ship down Limerick. ticking every box. I mean, like, we would just discuss them being bullied up front, and Jenkins is doing what he's doing for Leinster. I mean, you really hope they're asking hard questions of themselves at all levels of.
Well, they have been very, very unlucky with, and again, apologies for not correctly pronouncing his name in the safe knowledge that I never will, but R.G. Snyman has been one of the unluckiest players in Irish rugby over the last 3 seasons.
No, I take that point, but Jenkins, I suppose, jumps out a little bit. I guess it is the nature, because of his age in particular. You take a close look, and his importance to Ireland. You take a close look at Johnny Sexton after a summer's break and see any signs of deterioration. But he looked like he was in fine fettle.
He did. Back to his vintage self in every sense. There was almost something encouraging, having that running dialogue with the referee and always insisting in getting in the last word.
Yeah.
I'd say he was a nightmare to teach in the classroom, wouldn't you? But it was also great to see him playing so well, pulling the strings and the passing range, the goal kicking, that chip for his own try. Like, he's still a threat to the try line at 37.
Yeah.
He's so vital. He's still the most important player in Leinster, and still certainly the most important player in Irish rugby.
Yeah. What did you make of him, Fiona?
Yeah, I just thought he was outstanding. But even that whole, like as a non-Leinster supporter, people would be like, oh, he's whinging and he's moaning. But it's his teammates. Like, they absolutely love that leadership, and he's sticking up for them, and he's pointing out. So he's like the ideal captain. He's getting stuck in there, and he's in the ref's head, although it can be annoying. But, as someone that's around him and playing with him, you really want to play for that person when you see him doing that, and you see him constantly looking after you as a team. So, he just brings that leadership. He's all loop play was back again at its best. I thought he was just outstanding in distribution, and we see him do those loops and he gets absolutely nailed. Sometimes he puts someone else into space, and you're not expecting him to get up at that age. Well, I wouldn't have that age anyway, but he just picks himself up, brushes himself off, and moves on with the game. And I thought he was really, really good. A lot of times guys come back, and we talked about Jack Carty, and the more he gets, the more he plays, he'll come back in. He mightn't have had his best game for Connacht, but the thing about Johnny Sexton is he mightn't have played a couple of games, and he just walks in and is absolutely brilliant, and it's great for Ireland going forward with the World Cup, I suppose. There was a penalty just before half time against Leinster when they're under attack for a jackal. The right winger for the Sharks made a jackal, but clearly the tackler hadn't rolled away. Yeah. And Johnny, not so politely, pointing this out to the referee, because that's the other thing, he's generally right.
Yeah. Well, he did make the not unreasonable point. They tried to take two of our players' heads off later on in the game. Yeah. I was talking to someone who has a great sense of the game and has watched Leinster very closely, and they scored 8 tries, and that's great, but made the observation, if you want to stop Leinster, stop them in the first 2 phases or you're in big trouble. But that is the key, and if you do stop them in the first 2 phases of any kind of developing stage of play, off set piece in particular, then you really do have a great chance against them. It's just an observation, and
interesting. Because when they do start to generate momentum, generally when they get inside the 22 and their line-up maul goes forward, or the first carry goes forward, as soon as night follows day, there's a Leinster try coming down the road.
And I guess that's, when you think of the Toulouse where they ran, put 40-50 points on them versus La Rochelle, that is the difference.
The other key as well is the speed of their breakdown ball, the speed of their ruck ball. That's what blew Toulouse off the park. Even the head coach, Joe Molloy, admitted straight afterwards, we don't play against that kind of high tempo in the top 14. Teams against us don't, generate that kind of quick ball. La Rochelle took your theory to the zenith and actually slowed them down, and that's went a long way towards winning that final.
Yeah, so it seems teams of a certain level find it very hard to stop them, and then the very best teams manage to. But 21 tries in 4 games is some going for Leinster. We should mention Ulster as well. Luke Marshall, his great start to the season very much continues, scored 2 tries, man of the match, and they've made a big signing, it would seem. We're talking about South African bulk, so Stephen Kitchoff, Ulster next season, 30 years of age, 72 caps. I guess the guy with the red hair, if you're like, which one of those giant props is he?
The ginger.
Yeah. More Irish looking than South African looking, aren't you?
So 3-year deal, and that's a bit of heft.
That is a serious signing. Yeah, that's a serious signing. And Rory Sutherland, the interim as well, and it doesn't affect the growth of Tom O'Toole and Marty Moore's presence in tight head. It certainly strengthens their hand. It shows their ambition.
They've great backs. So the
backs are wonderful to watch.
If they can do a number on you up front, they're serious opposition.
What I love watching about Ulster is when they get inside the 22, it's not just crash bang wallop. It's not going to be just pick and jam, which frankly is getting a little bit tedious, isn't it? So many tries are now the same. Do you wonder, should we bring in a rugby league type rule? 5 pick and jams and you're done, folks. Now it's cross kick or play rugby time. You know what I mean? It's particularly all this head first stuff. You know what I mean? In the current climate, of player safety.
You're wincing. I mean, and like this fight with their heads, Fiona, to see who can get lower.
That's it, and they're definitely going to start looking at that area. Gerry, you could be onto a winner.
Well, it'd make for a better spectacle too, wouldn't it? Just too many tries the same. But they actually will try and play rugby. They will try and open sides up in the opposition 22, and they often succeed. I mean, again, they've been scoring some. I think they're 20 tries, aren't they?
Oh, easily. They must
yes,
be after.
I think they're second to Leinster.
trip
And
to
they're,
Wales as
yeah,
well.
yeah, and they're scoring some lovely tries. It's great to see Luke Marshall back playing so well again.
Yep.
2 seasons, I think, when he started 3 games through his various injuries. And they've James Hume to come back, the McCluskey there. Nathan Doak to come back, he's playing really good rugby. John Cooney playing really good rugby.
Yeah.
Billy Burns in his own quiet, unassuming way is playing good rugby as well. Then you put Balakoon back in that mix, and Ethan McElroy, as well as Michael Larry and Stuart Moore. Like, just an exceptional homegrown unit of back players there. Really good. Great to watch.
And with these signings, Fiona, there's just that sense of progression, moving in the right direction, and just a club with their house in order when you compare it to Munster, where it just seems even the off-the-field decisions are going wrong.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think they made 9 changes from the previous game, and they still just looked tight. They were so clinical inside that 22, as Gerry said. They change it up. It's not just the big guys carrying him. Vermeulen, it was great to see him back. I love watching him. There was a lovely carry, but the try was disallowed. But it was just watching him in action. I think he's brilliant. He gets gain line for Ulster, but a lot of guys have stepped up. I mean, the Rays are playing exceptional rugby as well. You're talking about the back line, so electric to watch. I mean, McCluskey and Marshall, that's a partnership that is really, really working. They really play off one another. They've probably grown up playing with one another. They're on that Ulster squad a long time together, and I think they're starting to come into real form. And for Marshall to be injury free, it's great for him. And look, they're getting the ball, and they're making the guys in the back three look electric as well. They've Sexton. They've just got some really, really good players. But it's the style of rugby which is exciting to watch. We mightn't have seen it as much in the Leinster game the week before, but they were all over this Ospreys team. I thought it was an exceptional performance and really, really good game of rugby.
One caveat to their house being perfectly in order is that despite scoring 52 points or whatever it was away to the Scarlets and playing some breathtaking rugby that day and having Leinster at home the following weekend, it was far from a sellout. And it was even a smaller crowd last week in the wake of the Leinster defeat. So I don't know if they're marketing the game quite as well as they should be. Are they overpricing the tickets? Colleagues of mine tell me the cheapest tickets there are £50 sterling. You know that it's expensive to go and watch an Ulster game.
Cheapest tickets for an Ulster URC game are 50
I think
sterling.
that's seated, not terracing now. That's seated. That's what I was told by Ulster colleagues of mine. And they do seem to be struggling a little bit just to fill the stadium out, which, given the brand of rugby they're playing, is a bit of
I'd be heading for the terrace, I'll be honest, at 50 sterling.
And then in the night against Leinster, if you had the terrace, you got drenched.
I'd be watching that at home. 50 sterling's a lot. It is a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I stand to be corrected, and that's what my journalist colleagues told me. But certainly, I've been up there a couple of times, and they have not been selling. And certainly it looked even less of a crowd at the weekend, which, like I say, given the brand of rugby they're playing, is a little bit disappointing. But then again, maybe we've been spoiled over the years by the way all our 5 provincial grounds have just been filled out in a regular capacity.
So what's the caveat then with Ulster, Fiona? Where are they going to come unstuck? We saw them lose to Leinster, and we've seen them obviously get to a certain level in Europe. What is the ultimate issue for them when it gets down to the really meaty stages?
I don't know. I think they seem to, it was obviously momentum last year. They seemed to lose it when it was coming into those big games. They were losing them by just a couple of points. They've signed a good few players. They look a lot sharper. So I don't know. I think they're game on. I think they're going to have a really good season. I think they could get far in Europe. They have that bulk. They have a really good, strong back row. Like the likes of Marty Moore has been rejuvenated. He's doing immense in the front row. He's great to watch. The line out seems to be going well for them. The guys are playing electric in the centre. We've really good back three. So it's just, I suppose, if they can keep these guys playing and stay injury free, they look pretty good to me when I'm watching them. Defensively, I thought they were good. Obviously up front, maybe Leinster might have bullied them a little bit at times, but they had kind of rotated a few guys. They've guys to come back in. You've the likes of Henderson as well to come back in. So there's nowhere that I'm not seeing at the minute where you could say let's attack Ulster in that area. I thought their maul defence was really good at times, and their scrummaging as well. So I think it will be more about the lines of keeping guys fit and keeping them fresh looking. And if they can do it as the season progresses, I think they'll go far in Europe this season.
I know I praise Billy Burns, but when you do think he needs to be brilliant, he needs to have his best season ever for them to climb the mountaintop. Because just thinking there in my head as Fiona was talking, I think the Irish provinces have won 7 Heineken Cups, and the 3 at halves in question have been David Humphreys, Ronan O'Gara and Johnny Sexton. You generally need an A-list top quality at half to win the Hamilton Champions Cup, albeit La Rochelle won it last year with Ohio West, which you mightn't put necessarily in that category.
Yeah, sure. So Leinster, as we said, will be in Galway on Friday. I didn't mention, just to mention, injuries to Jordan Larmour, Rhys Ruddock, Luke McGrath and Ryan Baird. 3 HIAs at the 4, which is the nature of a contest like that at the RDS. Larmour, the leg, so we'll get updates, I'm sure, across the week.
Well, none of them will be playing next Friday, that's for sure.
Gone,
and Larmour looks the most worrying of them.
Yeah.
Any update?
Just that they're waiting. They have to wait on the results of scan. They don't have the results yet, but he's looking like weeks rather than days, if you know what I mean. Whereas the other guys will probably, they certainly miss 1 game, maybe 2.
And go through the protocol then. Just to finish, Cheetahs 14, Emerging Ireland 21, the tour. So, you came and went, and we talked about it a lot, and I don't think it captured the imagination at all. What do we say in a line or two about this? How will this be remembered?
Well, Paul O'Connell and I know that Andy Farland time and all the Irish coaches will sing the virtues of this tour for forever to come, and all the players clearly enjoyed themselves and had a great time, and they had 3 outstanding wins, the pick of which was probably against the Cheetahs. I've no idea how they won the game, because they won it with less than 40% possession of territory. They gave away 18 penalties, conceded 3 yellow cards. If you could put a gamble on which 2 naughty boys were going to be in the naughty chairs simultaneously, you probably would have picked Keane Prendergast and Joe McCarthy, serial offenders. They got to stop. They've got to stop reaching out when it's the cause is lost.
Okay.
Just but there was lots of excellent performances. Tom Ahern, outstanding. Nathan Doak looks really classy. Obviously, Jack Crowley looked really well. Jamie Osborne played well. Jon Culhan is a serious player. Obviously, Max Deegan led the side very well, and Keane Prendergast did lead the side very well. Their line-out was excellent. They stole throws galore, but their scrum was obliterated. All in all, I'm sure it's been very beneficial for all those involved.
Yes.
And maybe 1 or 2 will come through and play in the squad for the World Cup. I don't know if it's going to make a blind bit of difference when Ireland play the All Blacks or France at the quarter-final, if it comes to that. But my concern all along has been the effect on the provinces. And like I said earlier, if Munster miss out in the Heineken Champions Cup by 1 or 2 or 3, 4 points, then potentially, we'll never know, but this tour might have come at quite a long-term consequence for them.
Okay. There's no World Cup bowl tour on that tour, is there, Fiona?
Well, there could be.
There could be a couple. I mean, you're looking at some of the performances aren't up to scratch and some of the teams. But, I think Nathan Doak would be someone that would be definitely putting their hand thereabouts. The back row is really, really strong, and Culhan is a young guy, but he's been absolutely immense. So you never know with injuries who could get in there. And obviously we've got the 2 you talk about, McCarthy and the second rows in there. They're quite good as well. They just probably need to bulk up a little bit more. And, you just don't know, I suppose, with injuries, but definitely form wise, I saw a few guys put their hand up and say, hey, have a look at me if there's any injuries. You might see them maybe in up and coming international games in November.
Tom Ahern had the final play of the match visually in the 81st minute, having been down for treatment, much to the annoyance of the South African commentators about 6 occasions, and he was definitely running on empty, but he makes the final jackal, wins the final penalty that's kicked out, and he gets the big 2x2 check for 5,000 rand or whatever it was for a man of the match. He's interviewed, and you can hear in the background him saying, "It's okay, boys, it won't fit into my pocket." So I'm sure they had a good time. Maybe it went into a kitty.
Money for man of the match. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
Spare me the silver.
Might have been for charity, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm sure they had a great time.
We are out of time. Fiona Hayes, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Great chatting.
Gerry Thornley of the Irish Times. Thanks, Gerry.
Pleasure.
Cheers. Our rugby coverage on Off the Ball with Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.